Disclaimer: this is audio horror fiction. If darkness or the creatures it holds scares you, leave now. Still listening? Good. Then let's begin. We deserved it. We weren't a frat, but we weren't far off. I know not everyone who joins a fraternity is a roofie-slinging monster, but we hit on about every stereotype imaginable as a bunch of loud, obnoxious jerks who spent most of our time making public spectacles of ourselves and getting blackout drunk. One usually leads to the other. We had our odd little customs, in-jokes, and an all but impenetrable barrier between ourselves and outsiders to the group. We told ourselves that it was in good fun, that no one got hurt, but that stopped being true in my junior year. Most of us met through the club, and the club president sweet-talked the head of the ecology department into letting us use the cabin a few times a year for what was supposed to be an educational retreat. Once in the spring and once in the fall, most of what we learned revolved around how much we could binge drink without killing ourselves, and how incestuous one ecology club could be in a long weekend. That, and how ugly we were as human beings. It all started with Marcy. No, that's a lie. It started with Will. I'm not going to start up the revisionist history by saying I never liked the guy, that I knew something was wrong with him. In a way, that just makes it worse, and what happened was bad enough. The truth is, I barely knew the guy. I did not know, and I did not care. I should have cared. It was supposed to be another weekend of misspent youths, a dozen and change college kids singing songs around the campfire, sleeping half the day away as our hangovers tried to kill us and hooking up with reckless abandon. It was easy to ignore the signs. We were all there to get laid, right? So what was the harm with Will winding his way around Marcy like a boa constrictor? Who was to judge when he kept pawing at her when she was so drunk she seemed to forget where she was? Would anyone take her seriously when she said she had been raped? We didn't. She didn't tell any of us openly, but word got out. It always did. There were no secrets in the club, and the club gave its members enough rope to hang themselves and everyone within arm's reach. Marcy stopped showing up to club meetings, to our social mixers, read, keg parties, to next semester's cabin retreat. We wanted to put it from our minds. We wanted to pretend it hadn't happened, that we hadn't let a monster into our midst, be it the monster your mother warned you about or the simpler monster of inaction. The police made us remember. Questions were asked, a case was formed. The club was all but gutted as the professors came down on us, and rightfully so. The police didn't have enough to convict him of anything, but the university had enough to expel Will. Last I heard, he drank himself to death a few years later with a fistful of pills to help himself go to sleep for the last time. I don't know if it was intentional, but I like to think that it was. And you would think that would be the end of it. Stupid, selfish, short-sighted. I sobered up a bit and grew up a bit in the year between Will's attack and what would have been the next year's fall retreat. We were at a friend's house, playing board games and busting each other's balls. It was in a moment of idle chit-chat with the rest of the former club members, as the club really only existed on paper those days, having been placed under a microscope so fine that we abandoned any pretense of being a club and just hung out on our own time off campus, that someone mentioned we should have been going on our fall retreat around this time, if not for. We all knew what he meant, but no one really knew what had happened to Marcy between the attack and the one-year anniversary. Rumors swirled. Had his baby, had an abortion, switched schools, dropped out, killed herself, but no one really knew. There were no secrets in the club, but she hadn't been a club member. Not really. She wasn't part of the unofficial inner circle. She didn't go as far back as the rest of us. Didn't know our little jokes. Didn't fit in quite right. I'm not saying she deserved what happened to her at all, but I'm doing my best to be honest with you. I don't want to spin up more lies about how everything is okay when it's fucking not. She deserves the truth at this point, and so does everyone else who went kicking and screaming into the dark. It started with Sammy. He biked home alone on that fateful night of board games and rumors, and that was the last time anyone ever saw him alive. No one knows exactly what happened, but the drunken gang of guys walking home from downtown found him in the middle of the road. We didn't exactly befriend those four, but a few of us did reach out to them, thanking them for pulling what was left of our friend out of the road. We know he was belligerently drunk when he left in a rage after someone called him an asshole for bringing Marcy up. We know he thought he was too fucking bulletproof for a helmet. We know the head trauma killed him. We think the damage done to his bike and legs are signs of a hit and run, but we will never really know. We buried Sammy. We mourned him. We poured a few out for him and told raunchy, filthy stories about him in our own little corner of the memorial. Savages, they called us. I can't say that they were wrong. Another year went by, and it was fall again, late September. While most people were dreaming up monsters to be for Halloween, we were running from the monsters we had been and not stopping Sammy and giving him a ride home the year before, and not stopping Will and beating him to death the year before that. Monsters of inaction. Kyle said as much as we waxed poetic and nostalgic one night in the most morbid way imaginable. We lost Kyle 1 month later, got into a fight with a guy who decided to bring a knife to a fist fight. Another funeral, another friend in the ground, another year gone by. Alex told me that my new girlfriend, Macy, looked like the old Marcy when he pulled me aside at a party one chilly night in October. The name was close too, he said. It was about that time of year, he said. Didn't I find that weird? I told him to fuck off. It was the last conversation I ever had with him. Someone beat his head in with a fucking claw hammer. The police ruled it a mugging. Macy died next summer. We talked about moving in together. I thought about buying a ring, but I couldn't stand being the other man. I told her to choose. So she chose heroin and died with a needle in her arm. At that time, I thought it was a silver lining that her mother had been the one to find her, but I've come to realize it's just another way for me to check out and absolve myself of all responsibility. I could have saved Marcy if I'd put two and two together. The glassy eyes, the confusion, Will dragging her up to that goddamn attic, Will showing up at the campfire the next day with bite marks all over his shoulders and arms that were too intense, too deep to be love bites. The things I heard in the night. I could have saved Macy if I didn't lash out and push her away, half begging her to quit and half accusing her of making a conscious decision not to. I now know that addiction is never that easy. It's an insidious thing that wraps itself around you like a boa constrictor and doesn't let go. Or maybe I should compare it to a king cobra pumping you full of poison. I don't know anymore. I just know that my friends are all gone, and I'm happy for the few that made it out alive. Kelly and Isaac moved away just before Macy died. They're on the West Coast and couldn't be happier. Luke went over to jolly old England for grad school and decided to stay. Mark is smoking his future away in Colorado, but that's just fine by him. I'm still here though. I'm still here in this college town that I've outgrown with my degree and my pretense of adulthood, but I can't seem to leave it. I still go by Macy's grave, still talk to her, still see her mom and her sister around town. I miss her every day. But I've been thinking about Marcy a lot lately too. I'm writing this long-winded post about her. Obvious. It used to be something that only ever came up once a year when someone went out of their way to broach the subject. And then we all forced it back down into the deep dark pit of our souls where our own selective memories could bury it with the simpler narrative that we did nothing wrong. But for the last few nights I've been hearing things in the night. Things from my attic. Things that sound like the noises Marcy made on the night of the attack. Half asleep in the room below and not wanting to be bothered to get out of the sleeping bag, I wrote them off as little moans of pleasure. Another brick in the wall of my own deliberate ignorance. But looking back, it's so painfully clear that I could hear the pained, terrified whimpers of someone who thought her life could end at any moment. I asked my roommates if they had heard anything weird around the house lately, but they both drew blanks. Should they have been hearing things? Was I playing a prank on them? I changed the subject quickly. They didn't know about my inaction towards Marcy and Will, and they don't ever need to know. I went up to the attic last night. I wasn't happy about it. I didn't want to, but what choice did I have? I couldn't tell anyone that I heard the faint sobs of a woman who survived an attack years ago. A woman who wasn't even living in the city anymore, assuming she is still alive at all. So I went up to the attic last night, and I didn't think about Marcy at all. Instead, I thought about Macy and how she killed herself. If inadvertently, I thought about my aunt slashing her wrist when she found out her cancer came back. I thought about how my grandmother tried to kill herself when her dementia set in, and she had a moment of shocking clarity. I thought about my mother saying she would rather end it on her own terms than face the cancer or the dementia that had ravaged her mother and sister. I did think about Marcy as I climbed down from the attic, about how alone she must have felt, about the shame and the pain, about how few would believe her, and even some of those people wouldn't be sympathetic to her. She had been drinking. She hadn't been wearing much clothing. She went out with a pack of drunken degenerates with a reputation for going through women like tissue paper. It reminded me of my own first time, if you can call it that, and how I wouldn't have wished it on anyone. I had a chance to stop it, to spare someone the pain that has made it so difficult for me to open up and be with a woman, and I blew it. It's summer. September and October are months away. I've been toying with the idea of going out west like Kelly and Isaac and Mark. I've thought about fleeing the country altogether like Luke, but I think it's too late for any of that. This place is wrapped around me too tightly, like a chain, like a boa constrictor, like a noose. That I've been thinking about Marcy so much lately means I'm probably next. I don't know how it works, but it seems to happen to the people who hold on to the memory in some way. But maybe it's nothing with a grudge or design. It could be as simple as karma. We do deserve it. I will probably lay awake again tonight and hear Marcy in the attic. I'll be sober as a judge this time, and there won't be anyone to stop me from going up to the attic. I'd like to think it'll be different. I'd like to think I've grown enough in the way of moral fiber to go up there tonight, in the wee hours, when my mind races like a hamster on a wheel, when my ears are full of sobs and my mind is full of what-ifs and could-have-beens. I'd like to think I will go up there and make things right, whatever it takes. Maybe it'll mean laying to rest Marcy's ghost, or my own demons and monsters. That's okay. I'll get to see Macy and Mom and my friends and family again. It's okay, even if Marcy doesn't kill me. The attic has a length of rope in the corner and a strong crossbeam running along those high ceilings. I will make it right this time. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to leave a like and subscribe and share to help feed the dark machine.